And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, bringing you your Alaska aviation weather for the next couple of days as we head through Friday into the early weekend, and looking at what we anticipate for the flying weather Friday morning. And setting things up, we have a massive ridge of high pressure over the Gulf, southeast into south central areas of the state. If this would be a summer pattern, we're talking about a big, warm, high pressure system that has very dry weather. Unfortunately, cool temperatures though at the surface, so nothing like that. But on the periphery, in the southerly flow on the backside of the high ridge, we find a stream of moisture coming up out of the North Pacific and crossing through the eastern Bering Sea. And low pressure, a couple frontal systems out this way, will create precipitation, heaviest up around St. Lawrence Island, along the west side of the Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait. And this area could see more in the way of some moderate icing out over this area of the northern Bering. And we expect IFR conditions, Utqiagvik, along areas of the North Slope, western Brooks Range, down along the west coast from the Seward Peninsula, and through Etolan Strait, the lower Yukon Delta, also especially on the Pacific side of the eastern Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula. As we go into Friday afternoon, still IFR conditions rather extensive here across the North Slope and along the Arctic coast, the Beaufort Sea there and the Chukchi Sea coastline, down through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence, down through Nunavik Island, Etolan Strait, and then down here along especially the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. For Saturday morning, we still have low pressure generally hanging out here across the Bering Sea. And with the moisture and the southerly flow, we find IFR conditions extensive across areas of the North Slope, Arctic coast, Chukchi Sea coastline there, down toward Point Hope, down through the Bering Strait, and again, all along areas of the west coast, especially lower Yukon Delta, and even up into areas of at least parts of Bristol Bay on the west side there. And as we look toward the east, there could be pockets of IFR conditions along areas of the north central panhandle, especially toward the outer coast. And for Saturday afternoon, a lot of VFR conditions here across the interior, south central, the Alaska range up through Yukon Flats. We expect that to be the case with this big high pressure just anchored over the region. But again, the southerly flow will keep moisture flowing northward, and as a result, IFR conditions are rather extensive along areas of the Chukchi Sea coastline, Seward Peninsula, down through Norton Sound, along the southwest coast, extending into the eastern central Aleutians. So Aniktuvik Pass on Saturday, especially morning, expect MVFR conditions. Same thing there at Adigan Pass as we go up through the central Brooks Range. And then further south and west, the west arm of the Alaska Range. Lake Clark may see MVFR conditions throughout the day. Further north, Merrill, and as we go further north up through Rainy and Windy Pass into the central Alaska Range, VFR conditions will hold thanks to that big ridge of high pressure in the mid-levels of the upper atmosphere. And further east, Isabel Pass and Mentasta Passes will see VFR conditions there across the eastern Alaska Range. Further southwest, across the Copper River Basin, VFR conditions. Tanita Pass, expect VFR. And pretty much Portage Pass VFR conditions, though Friday morning there could be MVFR conditions along the east entrance out toward areas of Prince William Sound. And further east, north end of the Panhandle, we expect Chilkoot and White to see VFR conditions throughout the day on Friday. So looking at the freezing levels aloft, they are highest out along southern areas of the state and especially over the Gulf, North Pacific, in excess of 10,000 feet. A reflection of that warm dome of air that's located in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. As we head further north, freezing levels aloft fall to 2,000 feet and below once you get up toward the Brooks Range and northward, and also across the northern Bering, especially there just north of St. Lawrence up through the Bering Strait. So as I mentioned earlier, when you have a big high sitting in this region, the southerly flow on the backside of it is going to have a cloud cover, areas of precipitation. The greatest threat for some moderate icing on Friday will be up, especially just south of the Bering Strait here, through the North Bering Sea, including St. Lawrence and down towards St. Matthew. generally above 6,000 feet. Further south, there's also more moisture streaming northward, warmer air along this area aloft. So we don't expect any type of icing until you start getting above 8,000 and 12,000 feet here across the eastern Aleutians and through the lower portion of the Alaska Peninsula. So here at 30,000 feet jet stream level, here is a large area of high pressure, the circulation like this in a counterclockwise manner. And we are seeing the strongest jet core winds upwards of 110, 120 knots here over far northwestern Canada. But across the west side of the mainland, winds are out of the south, southwest, turning more westerly once you get up toward the Brooks Range and North Slope, and generally a westerly flow aloft there across the central western Aleutians, bringing it down to 700 millibars or around 9,000 feet. We see here that across the Alaska Peninsula, across much of the eastern Bering, southwest coast, Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, all the way up here to Nome and St. Lawrence, winds are out of the south, anywhere from 40 to as high as 50, 55 knots, a core of stronger winds aloft. And bringing it down to 3,000 feet, we see these winds in that 35 to as locally as high as 45 to 55 knots here, right along areas of the southwest coast, Kuskokwim Bay, back toward Nunavik Island. So naturally, this is going to translate to a greater threat of some moderate turbulence along areas here of the southwest coastline, including Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, Etolan Strait, where you have the narrows there and the southerly flow pulling through that gap, increasing the wind flow. And we expect moderate turbulence here across areas of the southwest extending back toward St. Matthew, surface to 4,000 and a little higher, surface to 5,000 feet, especially on the Pacific side here of the Alaska Peninsula. And then one other little pocket of potentially moderate turbulence located just offshore of Kaktovik in the Beaufort Sea. There could be some moderate turbulence, surface to 3,000 feet. And as always, check the latest forecast and conditions before you head out. Make a flight plan, and I wish you a safe flight.